Hello.
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 Howdy, fellas.
Hello,
Hello. Good morning.
Good morning, coach.
good morning.
Well, you two guys. Oh, actually, it's 12:30 for you guys. My
It's
bad.
12 p.m. for
Well,
me.
well,
12? Okay, when I
yeah,
checked, it was 12:30. All right.
You work in CET, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's 8:30 for you.
Yeah, it is. All right, that's how it works. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
What part of India are you guys in?
Different parts. Like I am from the northern part, which is the capital
I'm from
Delhi,
Mumbai.
and some people are from
Okay.
Mumbai, some are from Rajasthan, like the west part.
Yeah.
Some people are from the north part. So it's like very diverse.
Are you guys living together? Are you in like some sort of gaming house, or is it mostly online what you guys are doing?
But currently we are in at our homes, but in between there was like a 1 week boot camp together.
Okay. All right, that's nice. Okay, cool. I'll share my screen and we can get going. Yeah. All right. Oh. Okay, and then here. All right. So today, compared to the other sessions that we did on routines, mental skills, some factual stuff that you needed to know, the talk about autonomy can be a bit more a discussion. I've prepared less slides and more opportunities to just talk, because it's a concept that I've personally put into the pillars of performance because of the way I've seen the best team play throughout my career as a player, as a coach, and as a performance coach. When I saw teams that were like actually, winning championships, there was like a common factor in players to be extremely autonomous. What I mean with autonomy really here, when it comes to like the advantage it gives you in game, it's really the ability to learn the game and think about the game by yourself, more so than having to wait for directives all the time from your coaches or from your leaders and that kind of stuff. So it was like for these guys to really embrace the fact that, they needed to develop themselves and reach a point where like, you're in game environment, it's very much the case, right? Where like you're in game and you can read what the opponent is doing and you can adapt versus always set plays and not really understanding it, right? I've seen it in Counter-Strike a lot. I've seen it in like other games as well, where like it's required. You have a lot of game knowledge to have, and you make a huge difference at this level of play. Everybody can aim at this level of play, more or less, but like most of the guys are really cracked at aiming. And then the true difference is truly on like how much do you develop yourself in terms of like game knowledge. And for some people, it's, let's say, fairly easy, or like at least they want to do it. Others had to force themselves and build some discipline. This is where the part is hardest, because it wasn't something that they truly enjoyed about the game, but they realized that that's the way, it needs to be played if they want to be the best. So if you want today, what we can do is like sort of like break down how do you actually reach a high level of autonomy. It's through mechanisms that I've listed here that are fairly common, but it's about like how do you apply them, like the self-vote reviews, the goal setting, that kind of stuff. We can go a little bit more in details if you guys want. I had a bit of a chat with your coach, but I'd like to have like a reassessment as well. How many of you guys right now, and be fully honest, because it's not a point to blame or anyone, are doing like solo vote reviews? When I talk about solo vote reviews, it's like yourself, you're like, okay, I'm going to rewatch myself, or I'm going to rewatch like, how my team or like the other team played. Through a week, like how many times do you guys do that? If you had to give me a rough estimate.
I used to do it before, but not recently. But it's like now I watch any matches of
Okay.
mine from any tournaments that are being streamed on YouTube. So like I like to watch what's my positioning and how am I, you know, like playing with my team and everything. But recently, not doing any kind of self-fought reviews. But yeah, I used to
Okay.
do it.
Okay, I see.
Max?
Okay.
No, recently not. I've stopped doing it. I watch like pro matches concept, but not about like own POV.
Okay, I see.
Laffy?
Right, and yeah,
Sorry.
Uh, I
go
don't
ahead now.
watch my ranked POVs. I watch the screen POVs and the tournament POVs, actually, not the ranked ones.
Yeah. No, I mean the rank ones would say less important. I'm really talking about what you're talking about, scrims and matches and like official matches from other pros, right? Do you guys have a system? Because I'm not too familiar with Valorant yet. Do you guys have a system in game, built in game, so that you can rewatch your scrims? So you have to record.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, I see. Yeah. So the thing about like the self VOD review, it's something that goes even beyond the sport. About like, and I'm really talking about like rewatching yourself and rewatching your team. That's the next level as well when you go beyond. And you're not only rewatching how you played, you're truly rewatching from the third person perspective of like, and if that's something that like is possible to be recorded, and you have access to that, that's the way to get the edge. And as I said, it goes beyond esports. Like I have an example, we were talking about Kobe Bryant last week. I have another example of him talking about it because he was really like, into it, into like, learning the game. Basketball, in many ways is very strategical as well. And you see the best players, they study the game. And when we talk about study the game, it's really about how do you VOD review. I will show you a template after that about how you can do it and everything. And then I'll be interested to also discuss like how do you guys actually do it when you rewatch your POV. But yeah, truly, if I can just give you like just a bit of advice again, like seeing teams that at tier 1 level, we're talking about tier 1 level in different games, and like most Counter-Strike, what I've seen like in terms of FPS right now, like Counter-Strike, Overwatch, Rainbow Six, Apex. I think that's it. Maybe I'm forgetting one. The difference between the tier 1s and the best teams at the tier 1, so like the championships winners and everything, and the ones that are like sort of slacking at tier 1, is truly this. Instead of like, if you're not talking about like team chemistry and everything, it's truly like how much the players are aware of the strategy, how much they're doing research, how much they can think. And usually at this level of play, what I've seen, like, you're in the top tier 1 teams, you sometimes have like real prodigies in terms of aim and everything. But overall, everybody can pop off and everybody has the ability to play well. True difference when I've coached these teams and when I've tried to help is how much the players are involved into learning the game. And that goes through like both more or less self-VOD reviews, but that gives an edge when you're able to read the game in game and not like, after and everything. Through just like a process of VOD reviewing a lot, you're able to sort of like slow the game down when you're playing. And that's something that actually Kobe Bryant was talking about as well. We'll watch a video about it. And you're able to get that edge. And again, I'll show you the video and then we'll go into like some sort of templates that I've given for players and for coaches that were like learning to how to develop that autonomy. And yeah, I think that can be a good start for a conversation. So let me just see if that works. I've included the link in here. So he's talking about like when in Kobe Bryant here, he's talking about like watching film. Watching film is basically how do you VOD review in traditional sports, right? We can have a look.
What I observed a lot of my
Do you guys have the sound on right now? Is it
Yes,
working?
yes, we can hear it.
Okay. So let's watch the video.
what I observed a lot of my career is how players study film. Because now it's become like you watch game film, you see what you do right, you see what you do wrong. Okay, let's do more of that, let's do less of that, right? But the way I grew up, from Tex Winter, Phil Jackson, the way film was broken down, it was broken down to the smallest detail. It was broken down to the right angle. It was broken down to foot placement, timing, looking at the posture of a teammate. What could he be thinking? What could he be feeling? Same thing with the opposition. You watch the feed, watch players go into the timeouts, who's talking to who's not talking. You start looking at every little thing. And so watching the game for me would take like 5 hours. And that attention to detail is what's missing. So I felt like if I can put that in a show and have the next generation, these 11-year-old kids, 12-year-old kids, start watching the game at that level, what are they going to be when they're 25? You know, what level would they be at then? It's a passion of mine to get that thing going. Like I said, April 12th would be the first episode.
So basically, well, there is a couple of stuff here that are not really relevant to the competition in esports. But the idea of what he's talking about is truly like there are different steps on how to VOD review depending on like your level of autonomy. The first steps usually is to rewatch yourself, especially when you have to do a lot of development, just in terms of like, okay, strategically and also mechanically, how do I play? The next step is what I'm talking about in terms of like when you're really developed is when you start truly looking at the game in general. You're looking at the other team and you're looking at your team from a macro perspective and knowing like what the other roles are supposed to do and everything. That's the next step. That's what I'm talking about in terms of like the elite edge. This is what like all the best players take into account. I don't know like what the best teams are. In Valorant, actually, I do like have one of my friends is managing the G2 team, which I think perform extremely well. If I'm not misunderstood, at like the last Valorant, I think they lost, right? The finals, or
Low
did they win?
finals. Not low finals actually. Just before the lower finals, they lost.
Okay,
They were like in the top 4.
Okay, top 4. And I think like at one tournament, did they go to top 2? Was it like a couple of months?
Yes.
Yeah,
In the
so that's the
finals,
one I'm not up to date, so like too many games. But yeah, like this is the kind of stuff that we already, when I was working with these guys, he was in Overwatch with me, this is the kind of stuff we put emphasis on as well, in terms of like how do you develop yourself. And I'm fairly certain these players are extremely smart, or at least most of them. So the way, how do I stop this video? Okay. The way we can, I'll give you like a template and then we can just have a basis for discussion on how you do it. The way usually I give a framework to work on this kind of stuff, let's say you're rewatching, on where should you put your attention? Truly, it's always about attention. When you're rewatching, I'm taking here, you have an example of Call of Duty, because in Call of Duty, it's a real problem where like players do not VOD review and they just go in the play and they aim, most of them. And then you have like an extremely big gap between the best players who actually figured out, okay, I need to increase my game sense and I need not only to shoot people, and the guys who still are playing at tier 1 and making a shit lot of money. And they're in the league, right? The major league. But all they do really is being gifted mechanically. There's a huge gap. And so I had like a lot of work to do in Call of Duty into like, okay, how do you actually develop yourselves? Because the leaders and the coaches were going crazy because the guys were just not, developing their ability to learn the game. So it's about where you put your attention. This is called the phase framework. So each letter for like something that you can focus on when you rewatch your VOD. And this is linked to goal setting as well, and we'll say that a little bit in details after. You need to, let's say you take a precise example in VOD review, you need to know like what should have been and what should be your focus during that scrim. What was my focus? What was my goal? So you guys all have like different roles in Valorant. What was my goal? What was my role? So you can just keep that in mind when you're rewatching it. And then you can go into sort of like two things. It's a comparison of two things. It's a comparison between what happened during the game, what was going through my mind, how did I actually play, versus how it should have been played. And how it should have been played, usually you get that information mostly from watching films, because you have limited information when you're playing the game, and you have the information from your teammates and from what you can see. And then through rewatching from third person, which is why it's usually extremely important to be able to have a recording of third person, not only solo person, if you want to really learn. You can compare and you can learn. And that's the way you sort of like try to understand like tendencies of teams on like how do these guys play, how do we play, start thinking about like what's the best way to play and everything, right? Basically what you guys are doing already, I think, in VOD reviews. But you go through this phase of awareness. So like right now we're in the state of like you're focusing on what you've seen in the game. What did you notice, right? What did you see like the enemy team in terms of rotation and everything? Was there clarity in the way you played? Meaning like, did you listen to your teammates giving information? Was the plan clear? Did you, call your intention or information? precisely exactly the same thing, I assume, in the way you organize your communication as in Call of Duty. So that's the phase of like, how do you actually play? And then, you know, draw the consequences. Maybe like you fucked up here and there. Should have listened to the call. Maybe there was one guy holding an angle that you didn't listen. Your teammates tell you about it. You died. You pause and you're like, okay, you know, this is what happened. Actually, what should have I done, right? And you can do that for like individual performance for yourself precisely, or you can do that again. The next level is like as a team. When you're able eventually to go through your VODs and watch it from third person and to have that precise reasoning as less, okay, what did we do as a rotation as a team versus what we should have done? This is where you're going to get a clear edge over your enemies because you're able to read the game. And when you're going to be in game, when you're consistent with it, obviously you guys are still doing it to some degree already. This is where like truly you want to get an edge, and this is how truly you're going to reach tier 1 or like the highest level of tier 1 if that's what you guys want. So the phase framework in that sense work extremely well because you can go over these steps and it gives you like a template to watch VODs and to be like, okay, you know, where was my attention when I was the game? How was I thinking? What did I see? Was I clear on the plans and everything? And then, okay, I saw that everything. Actually, what should have happened? And if you don't know, you can always ask your teammates or try to figure it out by yourself. That's one template. I'd be interested then to discuss a little bit like, and again, like it's just a truthful conversation, no judgment or anything. About like when you told me like you were watching films and VODs, what do you guys tend to watch? Do you tend to watch like mostly your perspective? Do you tend to try to watch the other teams? How does that work for you guys?
Flame? आवाज नहीं आ रही. Hello? Max, you go.
Like first I prefer my perspective, then I prefer others' perspective, like what they did and what I did wrong.
Sorry, could you repeat? I'm not sure I quite catch that. I think it's like your microphone.
Hello?
Yeah.
So I said like first I prefer my perspective, like then I prefer others' perspective, what they did and what I did wrong or what I did right.
Okay, I see. Okay, thanks. Anyone else wants to share?
La Flame, Lavish. Lavish, you go ahead.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes.
It's nothing like that, but like I really like to compare my roles and what I'm playing with other pros. Like I watch their streams and I watch pro matches and I focus on like what individual character is doing in there, like what individual agent is doing in there. So like I realize like what I start the game with from the first round till the end round, and then I compare that game with what they are doing. So I get to know like what is their positioning and what I could have done better. What are the rotations? What are like the economical managements and how they utilize their util. So like I really like to compare myself with like high leagues player. Like that gives me like good mindset for it.
Can I also answer this from a coach perspective? Okay, so when I watch like pro teams, like champion teams or like tier 1 teams, I basically look at it like as a Bible, first of all, like how they are playing, and then I also try to understand the concepts. For example, if they're losing the map control, what reactions they are doing, so it's not like they're doing some things randomly or I'm copying in some things randomly in my team. I try to understand why did they do this reaction, why do they have this positioning, and what the opponents are doing that they have to like do something like this. And when I do the individual word review of like a player, I go in depth, in terms of their movement, their crosser placement, maybe they're clearing the angles lazily, so every micro detail I think makes a big difference, because even if your macro is good, but if you are individually, not focusing or doing those micro details like perfectly or like at least better, you can still lose the rounds, or still lose the game. So that goes in my mind.
Yeah, definitely, it's a good point. How many times do you guys do? You're talking about solo VOD reviews. How many times do you guys do team VOD reviews? Is that something you do every day, or is that like on a weekly basis?
When we practice, we do it like every day, kind of like, for example, we play scrims, and then after the scrims I have like some rounds noted down which I bring up to the team. But like if we have to do like a full VOD review, we usually would do that, let's say, once a week or like twice a week. But we do like discuss like few rounds together. And I also encourage this to the players that, if they see something wrong from their perspective, they should clip it and just bring it to the team and discuss and fix the micro details.
Okay, I see. Yeah, definitely. All right. Well, thanks for sharing. I think again, like in the purpose here of just like it being a more sort of discussion, the way I see it is truly like, how do you, and this is perhaps something that we could go into details like into the next sessions about like team structure and team values and everything. It's like, how do you structure your day around like that sort of like development of yourself? And the way when I've talked with like, any coaches and everything, again, like beyond cross esports and everything, usually the thing that they realize is that we're spending a bit too much time training and playing. And you guys probably like playing a lot of ranked, from what I understand, and playing your scrims. Usually we scrims like at least 2 blocks a day, 2 blocks of 2 hours, maybe like 3 blocks and everything in most cases. Not enough time actually rewatching the game. And you have like a lot of time then where like you play the game without a true purpose. So like that's the way I go into like goal setting. Is like when you're going into a map, I think Lavish, you were talking about it, of like perhaps like you've rewatched the map, perhaps you've rewatched like some pro player playing the game of this map and like taking angles in a strat that is like the same that you guys use. You're like, oh, I'm going to try this and that. That's basically goal setting. Well, like you go into a map precisely and you're like, okay, as a team, we need to focus on this and that. Usually you keep it to 2 goals, you keep it short, right? And as an individual, I need to focus on this. If you have these goals already, guys, like every week, every day, every map that you play, that's great. You're doing it right, and then you're going to develop your autonomy, because through goal setting, you basically remind yourself of like, what did I rewatch and what do I need to focus on to improve? But most of the cases, I'm not putting any blame on you guys if you do it, because that's usually what we do. And I've been doing it as well as a player. It's like you go into scrims and you're just like, okay, we'll see what happens, right? I'll just play and see what happens. The thing is, like, you're not getting the max improvement. So if you take this into like a 6 month period, if you go mostly into scrims being like, okay, what's going to happen? Like, we'll see. I'm just going to play and try to focus. Versus I have clear goals that I've set when I was rewatching myself every day. And then I try to apply these goals and I track these goals of like, okay, I need to be better at like communication. I don't communicate my information enough, or like whatever it can be in terms of in-game stuff that you need to focus, you need to fix about yourself. You do that over a 6 month period, and or versus like just being there in scrims and just chilling and not really having goals, the progression is going to be drastically different. And this is something that I wished was developed more in academies, like what you guys are doing here. Because again, as I said, like in many tier 1 esports, you have players that reach the highest level of play, very good mechanically usually, but then they don't know how to rewatch yourself. And if you have to go through this process at tier 1 level, it's going to be complicated for your career, I mean, because you have guys there that have already figured it out by themselves because they were lucky and like they figured it out, or like they were just like draw to it, or like that coaches helped them before. And if you come here and like you're not used to that, it's going to be harder to maintain yourself at tier 1 level, because again, that's the true difference. If you have the mechanical skills and everything, that's going to separate you and everything from the rest. So you guys do what you want with these reviews and everything, right? So I'm only giving advices and everything, but truly, even at tier 1 level, there's not enough time spent studying the game because it's less interesting to players in general. But it's what should be done if you want to reach the best level and if you want to maintain yourself at the highest level. This is what the guys at like truly the highest level do, or at least they did it. Now some players, like they barely need to do it that much, or they just maintain because they've done it so much in the past that they have the game sense already. If the game is not evolving that much but still, they're still most likely doing it more so than you think. And actually, like the phase that you guys are on in terms of academy, I would say it's extremely important to put your focus on that. And this is like the phase framework that you see on the screen is good because it gives you a template of like, oh, when I go into my POV, instead of watching like how I am and just hyping myself up, which no joke is what some of the guys in Call of Duty thought was VOD review. It's just watching yourself and see how much you actually kill people. It's like, okay, let's truly analyze what I've done, what I should have done. And you just build your game sets through this. And through this, you rewatch, you're going to see patterns. You're going to see similarities like, oh, I did this mistake 3 times, 4 times. That could be a goal. If you repeat the mistakes many times, that's a goal that you can have going into next stream to fix it. And when I talk about goal setting, it's truly like, you take a sticky note, you take something and you're like, okay, precisely today, I want to focus on this. This is something that you can communicate to your coach or that your coach can give to you as well of like, probably what you're doing already is like, okay, you're consistently doing this mistake, let's try to fix it. But my point with autonomy development is like, eventually, if you can reach a point where like your coach helps you, but you also mostly help yourself and you set up those goals yourselves and everything, you're going to get that edge. That competitive edge above the others. That's truly something that I've seen also in tier 1, in like some guys, and perhaps it's the same environment. Maybe less so now because everybody's starting to get skilled. But in Counter-Strike or like in Overwatch or other games, you would see that where like there are guys that are in position of leadership. Usually they're not the best mechanically. So on the server, you're like, what the fuck is this guy doing here? It's not that good. Well, he's here because strategically he's really fucking good. So like he can call his team how to move and everything. He can understand and adapt on the fly and everything. And the reality is like when you talk about the best teams, everybody can do that. Or at least there's like, everybody do it on the ground level and then actually calling in game is a different thing. But everybody can understand the game at the highest level. It's not about like these players figured out like, okay, mechanically, I just need to maintain myself because I'm good enough, right? And then what he's going to give me the edge is like, how much better do I understand the game compared to the other guys? So I'm going a bit in circle here, but it's really to illustrate that this is really important. It's about like, how do you review this? How do you set up your goals? I've one other thing to show you. It's about really like goal setting, and like it's just a template that I use, so you keep taking sort of like out of context, but about like how do you actually use that? How do you develop your autonomy and like your game sense? So we talked about like the phase system. And this is about like a problem, and you can tell me if that's a problem that perhaps you've had as well in Valorant, in the way you see things. Is like, I was telling you about like, how do you put your focus from map to map on like, okay, I need to focus on this, I need to focus on that. Well, there's usually a problem in esport in the way we go from map to map. Is like, you're gonna have like people talking, let's say like you just ended a map and you have a debrief of like, maybe you have 5 minutes in between the first map, the second map, you just played the first one. There's going to be a lot of information. Like people are going to talk about this and that. Oh, we should have done this or have done that. So like you have, let's say like 5 different informations going here and there that you need to focus on. But the reality is like you're going into another map that maybe is drastically different. And then you're putting your focus and your energy sort of on like understanding map specifics about the maps, the previous map that you already played, right? That you're not going to play until like, the next block probably. Versus you should actually put your focus towards the second map. So what I usually tell the guys, like, well, there needs to be a filter in the way you do it. It's like, you can always talk about this kind of stuff and everything, but at some point it's like, okay, let's filter out. Is there anything on this information, anything on the way we play this map that can be applied to the next one? So whether it's like communication or energy is usually a good thing. If your communication is low because, you just woke up and you're screaming and you're like at 50%, that's something you can amp up and that's going to affect the next map. But map specifics, usually it's a good thing to note them down, but not necessarily to go into details. It's better to go next and be like, okay, what is the one thing or 2 things that we did the last map that can be applied to the next one? So you set up goals, basically. And usually, as I said, like try to keep it to 2. Even if there's more things to work on than like 2 goals, okay, what are the 2 things that are the most important? Maybe the one thing is like, to amp up the communication because your energy was low. And the second thing is like, okay, remind us of the map that you're actually going to play instead of talking about the maps that you just lost, which is usually what we do in esports. Like when we lost a map, we're like, okay, let's debrief, try to figure out right now why we lost it. But most of the time, you're just going to feed information in your brain that is not even relevant to the next one. You're going into the next map because, the enemy team is starting the map. You didn't even talk about and then basically you're wasting practice at this point, or at least you're not at 100%. So that's like what we call a feedback loop. It's like, Okay, you filter that information, what needs to be right before you go into the second map. Okay, what's the goal number 1? What's the goal number 2? You go into the scrim focusing on this rather than only focusing on winning. You're like, okay, this is what we need to do. We're going to assess ourselves, about like, okay, after the map is over, did we do good on goal 1, goal 2? Do we need to keep going? Like, is the energy high enough? Okay, if it's high enough, then we can skip it and switch to like 2 goals that are going to be strategical. And then it's just a repeat, you play the second map, something go right, something go wrong, filter it so that, and like if you go into details about all of this stuff, you can really optimize practice so that you guys are always having a goal in mind. That's what I meant in terms of like, you're going to have a goal for the day, but you're going to have goals for the map, right? And it's important to juggle between those two. And like specific for team, specific for yourself. Because if you put yourself in a loop like that of like, okay, I'm constantly evolving myself, drastically, you're going to see a difference. Like from the level you have right now versus the level you can have in like 3 months, 4 months, doing that on a consistent basis, this is where you're going to get your best results. So that's why I like to talk about like autonomy and like development in general. It's because truly it's from experience, right? This is what separates the best from the guys that are just slacking. And if you don't want to slack, even though sometimes it's not that fun to just rewatch instead of playing, truly it's something that you need to build some discipline on because that's what is going to, make you the best. So I'd be interested like to discuss, to have your perspective, you guys, on all of this and everything. How is it that you guys like structure your day already? Is that something that you thought about already? If you want to have that discussion, we can.
Guys, any questions? Or any discussion that you guys wanna?
Hello.
Yeah, Lavish.
Yeah.
Actually, I have a question from previous sessions as well. And
Yes.
Kind of from this session. That for me personally, like whenever I'm playing scrims, whenever I'm in practice, not every time, but sometimes like during scrims, when we are like losing a lot of rounds and we are losing consistently, I like kind of lose focus from like calls and like it's like bit tilting, and then then we're just like playing on autopilot and everything and not focusing really. So like, is there any advice where we can keep up with like very good mental, so like we can like throughout the 24 rounds of scrims, like throughout the 1 hour of practice, we can like keep same level of consistency and focus?
Right. Yeah, for sure. We can go into that a little bit. I think it refers to like mental skill training a little bit more. It's something that I sort of like, we skipped through this because it was like getting, late into the presentation already. You mentioned it's mostly because of like, you start losing a lot of rounds. It's a bit demotivating and everything, and then you start losing focus, right? It's related in a way to how do you see failure? We talked a little bit about like when we talk about performance, accepting, negative thoughts, accepting like, the natural things that happen in terms of emotions and everything, being able to reset, that's what I showed you here. In terms of like, you're aware, you categorize your thoughts and everything, you accept them, okay, like, I'm in the red zone and everything. Then you reset, and then always you start to refocusing. When I think about refocusing, it's what I've said in terms of goal setting, what we just saw. It's like, okay, what's my goal here and there? And if you don't have those goals, it's very easy to like lose attention because you're just in the game and you're like, okay, well, I'm just playing, But if you have a goal for yourself, a weekly goal, let's say, of like, okay, I really need to be better communication, you can put your focus back on this. It's really like, and the one advice I can give you is like, when it's about practice, it's really about like, how do you see practice? Like, what's the purpose of practice? You're going to scrim thinking, okay, I need to win. It's pointless. Like winning scrims is not going to necessarily give you like wins in officials. Like, and I've seen that plenty of times as well in like the best teams give their best, like they 100% try hard in practice and everything. They win the practice, they go into matches, they suck. And it's a reality for a lot of teams because they don't understand what practice is for. Practice is for setting up goals and improving on yourself. It's focusing on how do you win, not necessarily just 100% trying to win. Of course, it's always good in sometimes you try to win, for sure. Like you're always in a way trying to win, but like you're here to figure out like what's going wrong with you and what's going wrong with your team and improve on that. And like if you start seeing failure as an opportunity to learn, it's usually like the best mindset that you can have. Like we skip through this, and it's something that a lot of players are talking about. I don't think we necessarily have time to watch the videos, but I would recommend, like, I think I've sent you the link here of like watching the video of like sort of like how Kobe Bryant, again, talk about it. But if you're like in that spot of like you start losing in scrims, it's about like, you know, the only thing that you can reattach yourself to is your goals. You know, it's not that necessarily a problem if you start losing a lot of rounds, if you're trying to focus on your goals and it just doesn't work, because then it means, okay, perhaps like in terms of macro, like the other team is doing something that we can analyze later. But if you start doing, which happens a lot, losing a lot of rounds just because everybody's just like, you know, playing the game, no goals in mind, and then it starts going down and we don't know what the hell we're doing wrong and what's happening, then of course, you know, it's not going to work. So like the one thing that needs to happen, perhaps like the one advice I can give you in this kind of situation is like be aware of yourself of like, okay, I'm starting to go down, I'm starting to lose focus. Okay, that's the phase of awareness, you know, all right. Just take a deep breath. Let's try to refocus on my goals. Because that's going to happen. Like, you know, your scrims are not always going to be perfect. But again, it's about keeping consistent progress. It's really not about wins and losses in practice. It's really about like consistent progress. Even if you have a bad day of scrim, your team is not playing well, the energy is low and everything. Did I manage to like keep up with my goals? If you do that, eventually you're going to get better. You're going to have less of these days. But that's why I put emphasis of you need to have goals set in games, individuals and team goals that you can always remind yourself. And you always assess those goals after the map is over, after the scrim is over. That's the key to success, truly, and improvement. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, thank you very much. That answers my question. I really need to keep up with like, I need to keep bringing this one thing in my mind during practice, like repeat myself with like, okay, come on, let's focus, be aware, and like focusing on individual goals when you're feeling kind of less energetic. So at least it helps you and benefits you like afterwards when you like rewatch your WOD or discuss with your team practice. Like it really helps. Thank you very much.
Yeah, no worries. I really put emphasis on that. On truly, guys, like practice is for you guys to actually practice. Like you can I've seen that in some teams where like you have a scrim where like we win every map and the scrim is useless because, you know, the guys are less focused. They're just winning because they're better. They didn't learn anything. And you have days where like you play against a very strong team, you lose every map, you actually learn a shit ton and you improved. And the thing is, like, naturally through our emotions, when we lose a lot, usually, you know, the energy goes down. So when we win a lot, it's going up, we're happy and everything. You have to dissociate yourself with that a little bit and really only see progress. It's like you should be sort of like looking forward to playing teams that, like, you know, you have troubles beating because you're going to learn a lot. You probably have troubles beating because they're doing some stuff good that you can learn from, and you can learn how to beat them eventually. If you have scrim sometimes where scrim teams and they should just suck, it's a case when as coaches, then you have to find new ways to like sort of like keep the players involved. You try new strategies, you switch roles, you do whatever to keep people on like, okay, let's learn the game. But yeah, that's
actually
one way to keep it. Yeah.
Sorry to cut you. Like it's actually very true, and sometimes you know, this also happens when teams actually scrim against a team which is like not good compared to them, and they usually win on their individual level, you know, like they beat them on the aim or something like that. They usually just stop learning from that game, you know. For example, 4 rounds in, you're just winning 4-0, you're easily beating them, and then you'll be like, okay, let's just, you know, roll it down, let's just rush this, rush that, and we'll just win. But sometimes they don't understand that, you know, let's say even if we are better than them, we can at least practice our communication, right? Or we can just, you know, practice on specific strategies on which we might get punished on, you know, but at least we are learning something. But sometimes, you know, teams will get ego, oh, like if I'm playing to practice this specific stuff, and if I lose against this team in scrim, it might be like a bad look on me, or like, you know, they sometimes feel bad about it. But I always see tier 1 teams losing to even tier 3 or tier 2 teams in scrims just because they're practicing like, you know, some specific things. So I think that's also something which is really good for the team to understand. Even if the other team is weak, that doesn't mean necessarily that, you know, that scrim is wasted. You can still learn something out of it.
Yeah, definitely. It's a very good point because I've seen that and I've been on both ends. Because when I started my career, I was like in teams that were not so good. When I ended my career as a coach, when I was in Overwatch, so that was the Overwatch League, my teams performed drastically better. And so I've been on both ends. On like sometimes you scrim teams that are way better than you. You play one map, two maps, they play normally, and then the third map they play something very, very unusual. You're like, okay, these motherfuckers are just practicing random stuff because we're not good enough to compete on like meta strategies and everything. And when I actually switched and I went like to better teams, I was like, okay, I have a teams here that schedule it's very, very weak. Like we're gonna win playing at 50%. So like it's gonna be a useless scrim. And like how do you keep people involved? There's different stuff that you can do if you're really at that level of like the team against you is really bad. Some stuff that we did is like, okay, everybody's gonna mute yourself and there's only one guy that's gonna speak. It's very hard to do perhaps in your game in Overwatch, it was more doable. But then you start limiting information and like, okay, actually, can you figure out like, there's that one guy calling that isn't usually the in-game leader. Let's see how this guy does in terms of like understanding the game. Or like perhaps one thing you could do for Valorant is like, okay, change your leader. The usual leader can only give information. Everybody can only give information. One guy is supposed to call everything. Or like you switch roles. Maybe one guy is supposed to hold that position and then you switch it up and the other guy hold that position. And let's see like if everybody understands the team strategy or are you only understanding what you're supposed to do, which is not good. You're supposed to understand everything. So like there's always a way to sort of keep yourself entertained. I would definitely value that because in this kind of scrims, when you're at 50%, you're really not, you're losing practice time. You're just winning against a team that is bad. It's really not giving you anything. You're not focused. So like whether this or that, or like focus on precise goals. If you have a strategy that's a bit cheesy, you want to try, that's the opportunity to do it and everything. But the idea is always to keep to keep practice purposeful. Like, you have a goal, you're practicing something, you're learning something from it. When you have bad teams, you have to get creative. Against you have to be creative about how do you get that information and that knowledge. But yeah. Okay, we're a bit over time, but if you guys have any other questions, we can go into like the sessions that we're going to be about, or like if you have other questions about routines or mental skill training, feel free to talk about it.
No question from my side.
Okay. Any questions from the other guys?
La Flame.
No, not really.
Okay, cool. Well, then I think we can keep it at that. I will send you the link again. Let me do that right now. Although there isn't much, but if you guys want to use the template, or if you need like any other, information, feel free to share like my Discord tag as well, and add me on Discord if you ever have like a question about this kind of stuff. I'll
actually share you my ideas of like the goal setting for individual players and the team, and I would like a feedback on that, like or you can just tell me like if you think it's okay. I'll send you on Discord.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Yeah, sure. I'll check that for sure. I've shared the template, and yeah, basically, if there's one thing to remember from this session, is truly like more VOD reviews, more solo VOD reviews. Try to find a pattern and like a way to VOD review that works for you. Not only watching yourself play, ideally, like it's good to start at this and then compare yourself as you were saying, to start watching yourself and then compare, okay, how this other pro is playing. Then you're like, okay, maybe I should do this, do that. That's very good. Eventually you can move up in terms of like also like watching third person of like, how does this team rotate? Why are they rotating? Is that like something was an opening or anything? And through this, you go into scrims. The one thing that I can say is like set goals. As a team, okay, precisely this map, what we're trying to do, 1 or 2 goals max. If you put too much, it's too hard to focus, but 1 or 2 goals. And individually, okay, what do I need to focus on? This week or this match or this map, you always need to have goals and to track these goals. And like once it's good, once it's done, okay, you're like, okay, let's move on to the next. That's actually the best way. If you start structuring that, you're going to see a change in your improvement. It's going to go drastically faster. I can guarantee you that.
Okay.
All right. Yeah. Well, thank you very much, guys. And again, I'll see you on Monday for the last session. We can talk a little bit more about like team culture, team dynamic, related a little bit to what we talked about as well. How do you structure your day to be efficient?
Yeah.
But yeah, that's it on my end.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Take care.